Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. And welcome to this Areopa webinar. And in this case, we have gotten a new subject, lessons learned from using Power Automate approvals with Business Central. I am Bert Verbeek, your moderator today, and this is already the 106th webinar. And in this webinar, what I already told about the lessons learned, Arend-Jan Kauffmann will take us into his lessons that he has learned. And thanks a lot for joining us, Arend-Jan, and especially all the traveling you got time for present here. Some housekeeping rules. Your mic is muted. You can ask questions in the question windows, and I've got an agreement with Arend-Jan that I will pick up the questions directly when it's asked there. And also, this webinar will be recorded, and all the recordings will be there on our YouTube webinar, and we have already around 100 recordings. That's quite valuable also for the community. And we want to especially thank Jeremy. He has a shout out on Days of Knowledge, and he was there and also introduced Areopa webinar. So thanks a lot, Jeremy. So if you have any colleagues and stuff like that, reach out also to this channel on YouTube channel. So also, if you want to know more about us, you can subscribe to the newsletter. So every day, now and then, we send out a newsletter for all the new webinars that are coming up. And the upcoming webinars, and this is the last of this season already. And the first webinar or the next webinar will be on the 26th of May about the sustainability functionality with Nel Kauffmann. Then Jeremy will talk us through on the Markdown Magic of Mermaid. Also in July, Jose will give us some insight about 7 or so AI kill prompts. And on the 21st of July, Simon and Tobias will there talking about us on the boilerplate automate the development of REST API clients for Business Central. And of course, we are constantly looking for any speakers or topics. So if you have one topic, please reach out to us. And first, for heading out to Arend-Jan, thanks for our sponsor, for NAV, to making this webinar available. And Arend-Jan, I'm making you now the presenter, and you can share your screen.
All right, thank you, Bert, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. So my name is Arend-Jan Kauffmann, for AJ, but it's a little bit easier for most people who are not a native Dutch speaker. Working as a CTO for Lumos 365 Limited, a partner in United Kingdom, and also a long-time MVP for Business Central. Today I want to learn a few lessons. No, I want to share a few lessons that I've learned, and maybe I learned something too as well, because that happens a lot when I present. I want to share a few lessons that I learned with Power Automate approvals linked to Business Central. And those lessons, they come from maintaining existing flows, approval flows apparently, or trying to reduce the number of approval flows that we have with our customers, finding out why a flow is stuck. So nobody has an idea what a status is, and then trying to find out what happened inside the flow so you know what to do for next time can be quite hard. And then, of course, when you find out when a flow is stuck, why it failed for some reason, you need to handle that error situation for the next time. So you need to change your Power Automate flow to handle error situations. And yeah, then you have a new version of your Power Automate flow, which means you need to deploy a new version to your customers, the environments of your customers, which means you have to manage them, and you must make sure that you can update existing Power Automate flows in a way that does not disturb daily operation. I mean, if you have an approval flow that is being used frequently, it really doesn't help if you reach out to your customer saying, hey, can you please approve everything, or I'm going to replace the flow and everything will be cancelled. So you need to send your approvals again. That there are things that customers will not appreciate. So how do you do that? And I will also talk about deploying flows to a production environment, and give you some tips and tricks there. So this is the agenda for this session. So not necessarily all in that order, by the way, but at the end of the session we should have touched all of them. The first lesson I learned with Power Automate is that not everything you can do in Power Automate is also wise to do. I mean, Power Automate can do a lot of things, obviously, but because it's possible doesn't mean you should do it, because what you probably end up with is by doing everything in Power Automate, you're building a complete application. Well, that is something that we learned the hard way. We put things in Power Automate that could have been solved in AL code. And at the end, we had a complete program in Power Automate. And then it started to float around at different customer environments. And then you need to change something. And well, end of story was that we had customers where they were running not only 1 or 2 Power Automate flows, especially for approvals, but 30 or 50 or even 75 Power Automate flows. Now, try to solve an issue in one of the flows. Well, you need to copy it over to 75 others. That is not really funny. You know, I'm only talking about one customer. So the first thing is keep them simple, keep them short, and use Power Automate for integrating with other platforms, but do not build a complete program in Power Automate, because that will eventually bite you rather than help you. And of course, I know if somebody knows Power Automate but doesn't know AL code, then all problems, yeah, well, if you have a hammer, all problems look like a nail, right? But then again, think about it and try to keep them short. Maintain existing flows. Another thing that was quite important that we learned is when you have a no-code solution, that doesn't always mean that you also save a lot of time. Low code or no code doesn't mean that you're also low on time. Actually, it is the opposite. Especially when it comes to maintaining a flow, deploying flows, managing all of it, takes a lot more time than when you compare that to modifying an app, publishing an app source, and updating your customers. In other words, deploying or scaling is something that Power Automate makes a little bit difficult, and that's what we learned, especially when it comes to the Power Automate flows that are connected to Business Central. And I will, of course, show you why. The first thing that we then learn when it comes to specifically the Power Automate flows, and this is not specifically for approvals, but in general, with any flow that integrates with Business Central, you have the option on the Power Automate steps that are connected to Business Central to use variables for the environment and company. That is, well, a positive thing in the first place, because if you would have a Power Automate flow with multiple steps, and on every step you define the Business Central environment and company hard-coded, then copying that flow for another company or to another customer means that you need to change the environment and the company on every single step in the flow. And that is a lot of work, as you can imagine. So using environment variables, variables for or dynamic values for the environment and company, that helps you with creating flows that can be easily copied to other environments, other companies, etc. But the point is, why is that actually possible? Well, the company parameter that is on a Business Central step is not required when for retrieving metadata details. What I mean with that is that if you have a step, and I'm going to demonstrate this in a minute, but if you have a step in Power Automate for that connects to Business Central, then it queries the Business Central environment to get the metadata details. What are the parameters and how does the JSON payload look like? All these types of information can be queried from the metadata from the API that it is calling. So it doesn't need a company name for that. So with a company as a variable, it is just working and it can query it from the environment. But if you have your environment as a variable, then the story is different, because in that case, it doesn't know where to go for the metadata details because you have not specified an environment. And when you do that, then you need to have more knowledge about the API that you are calling with that Business Central step. And that is something I will demonstrate in a minute. Now, if you would deploy a flow to a different environment, could be from development to production, or from one company to another company, from one customer to another customer, you need to remember that you use those environment variable and company variable everywhere in your flow. Otherwise, you're gonna have to change it manually, the hard-coded values. But the point is that if you do not use a hard-coded value for your environment, then it could be quite hard to work with it, because you need to have a lot more knowledge about the JSON payload. What I mean with that is, as you can see here on the screen, we have on the top on the screen print, we have the run action approve. Now the parameters list that you see there is not just a list of properties from that API. It is actually a JSON, a full JSON that you need to specify there. And you see that in the other one as well, which is a custom API that I created. And you want to call that API from a Power Automate flow, you need to know how the JSON payload looks like. Power Automate is not going to help you and create it for you. Well, this, of course, asks for a demo. So let me switch to a Power Automate environment that we have here, and I'm just gonna use this one as an example. Let me make it a little bit bigger. So this is an example. It doesn't really matter which one I'm using, but what I'm going to tell you is, in fact, can be applied to any Business Central step, an action that you take. So what happens here is there's a trigger when something happens in Business Central. I'm going to call the get customer step. Well, in fact, the get customer step is a step that retrieves customer data from the customer's API. So it's in fact the get a record step. So just a small tip on the side, it really makes sense to give your steps that you have in Power Automate a name. Otherwise you would get something like this. Let me just add a step here in between and find that step from the Business Central connector. By the way, just another tip, if you try to type in Business Central, then you get Excel and OneDrive and AI Builder, and you need to scroll down to find everything from Business Central. Don't ask me why. Well, the word business is here, the word business is here, the word business is not here. So it's really funny to see how the search works and how smart that search is. If you want to get Business Central actions in the top of the search list, just search for the word central and you get them in the top. Makes a lot of sense, I would say. So what I want to do here is just get a single record. And here you see that the get record is the name of this function, but it doesn't really tell you what are you reading here. While this one here is renamed to get customer, which then makes more sense when you maintain the flow later on. So do not forget to give your Business Central steps, your actions in a flow, a meaningful name. Now let me just go on with this step here. It's going to prove what I mean with the environment and company variables. Let me start with choosing a hard-coded value for environment. So it is now also capable of giving me a list of companies that are available in that environment. The API category, I leave that with v2.0. It's the list of standard out-of-the-box Microsoft APIs. And I choose from my list the customers. I need to provide a unique ID, which is in this case coming from the customer ID from the when a business event occurs. There I have a customer ID as a parameter, and that's it. Okay, so this is so far so good. Now, what if I want to retrieve a value from that get record? Let me initialize a variable and I give that variable a customer number name, and I want to have the customer number that is output from this get record. Let's just keep it as get record. So I choose dynamic content, and from the get record I choose no. No means not or negative, but also number in Business Central. So this works so far so good. Now I go into the get record here and I change the company and the environment name to be variables, because they can be the value that is an output from this trigger. This trigger contains the environment and the company name that are triggering this flow, so I can use them as dynamic values. So I don't have to change those hard-coded values when I copy it to another company or to another environment or from development to production. So I go with dynamic value. Say customer value, dynamic, there we go. So this is going to be the company do not choose the company name, go with the company because that is the company ID. Then here we have the environment and dynamic content. I always have to do this 2 times, don't know why, but it is how it is. And I choose here environment. Okay, now that I have this, let's go back into initialize variable. And this one here, let me delete that one. And look now at what get record is actually showing me. Only a body. It's not giving me the list of fields that are output from the get record because it doesn't know anymore. I've changed the environment name. Sorry, I've changed the environment name to be dynamic, meaning that it cannot retrieve the list of fields that are returned by get record. So yeah, how am I getting here the number of the output for the get record? Well, the only way for me to do this with a dynamic value would be to go back into this step and then instead of using a dynamic value, take the hard-coded value. And now if I go back into initialized variable and I want to change the dynamic, and look at this. Now we get the list of fields as the output from get record. So now I have this, I can go back into get record and then say, okay, now I have it. Let's now change this one back to dynamic content. And that is going to be the environment. Here it will remember what the output was, but anytime that I want to initialize for whatever reason or read another variable, another value from that get record step, and I want to do that as a dynamic value, anytime that I need to do that, I need to go back into the particular step and change the environment name to a fixed value so it can retrieve the data, the metadata, so I can use it in another step. And then go back into that step and change it back to a dynamic value, which is quite some work, and you don't want to know how many times I've done this and forgot to reset that hard-coded value back to the dynamic value, meaning that after deploying it to a production environment, it suddenly failed because it was using the incorrect environment. That is something that you really need to pay attention to because nobody's going to warn you for this. What you also can do, instead of using real dynamic values, you can also learn how this format looks like, because this is actually the expression that comes well, that gives you that specific value from the previous step. So what you can do, instead of changing the previous step to a fixed hard-coded environment value, I'm going to say, hey, I want to use an expression like this, and then you can change any value here, but then you need to know what the fields are from the API for, in this case, customers. For example, this display name for the customer name. And yeah, as you may know, the values, the field names of an API are sometimes different from what they are in Business Central. And a name is in the API certainly a display name, for example. What we know in Business Central is now here in the API a no, but is a number. But when you do it like this, you don't have to change the hard-coded value here. You can just use it as an expression, and that works as well. Okay, so This also goes into well, any place where you want to call something to Business Central, like I showed you here on this screenshot, where the row is going to be a JSON instead of showing me the different fields in Power Automate. All right. Having said that, let's continue with and focus more on approvals. When you are using Power Automate approvals, what is actually happening behind the scenes? What happens is that Business Central calls a Power Automate flow. That's the first step when an approval is requested. Power Automate flow then on its turn calls into the approvals connector that you have in Power Automate. The approvals connector has a number of steps. Create an approval, or start and wait for an approval, or wait for an approval. These two, create an approval and wait for an approval, are actually working together, because this one is actually the two in one, create and wait. But here it's called start and here it's called create. Start and wait actually means create and wait for an approval. And this is alternative where you only have a type of text rather than HTML code or whatever you can put into the message. So what this Power Automate step is doing in your flow is, well, from the templates from Microsoft, it uses the start and wait for an approval. But what does that actually mean? What does start and wait for an approval actually mean? Well, it stores some data into Dataverse. The Power Automate approval connector is in fact a connector to another external application, the Microsoft Approvals application, which stores the approval requests, including the data, attachments, etc., into Dataverse. So it requires a Dataverse database. And then when it is in Dataverse, it's just in a different database than it is in Business Central. And you should keep that in mind, because that means that the two systems are actually unaware of each other. The Dataverse has no idea about Business Central, and Business Central has no idea about that Dataverse table. Now then we have the Teams application. And the Teams application does have an app called called Approvals for Microsoft, and that app is actually reading data from the Dataverse tables. It uses APIs for that. Reading the data from the Dataverse tables to show the list of requested approvals to somebody in Teams. So the list of approvals where he is an approver for. So this means that the moment that you are in this situation where it is stored in Dataverse, the systems have no idea of each other, that has a lot of implications actually. Because if you let's start with the happy flow, what I call, if you in Teams say, okay, I approve or reject the request, then it is returned back into the Power Automate connector in Power Automate, and Power Automate then, well, just follows with the next step, which is reporting back the result to Business Central. While the user is looking at lists, so the data is stored in Dataverse, the Power Automate waits. And that means that Power Automate is actually even stored into Dataverse, the current state of the Power Automate flow. It is even removed from memory. It will not stay in memory, but it will be removed and resumed the moment that the user actually updates that approval request. So the situation that we have at this point is that Business Central is waiting for a Power Automate flow to report back the outcome of the approval request, while at the same time the Power Automate flow is removed from memory, is in waiting state, and the user is actually only interacting with the approval flow from Teams, or maybe from as an alternative an email that he got with a so-called adaptive card, where he also can click on reject or approve. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that if you, as a user who requested the approval request, if you go into Business Central and you cancel the approval request, then Business Central has no connection to Dataverse. This does not exist. Business Central cannot cancel the approval request in Dataverse. It will cancel the approval request inside Business Central, but the user, the approver, is still seeing the approval request in his Teams. And I will demonstrate that in a minute. Because what then happens when the user, the approver approves, it goes back to the Power Automate flow, who is then reloaded into memory, reports back the response to Business Central, but Business Central was not waiting anymore for that approval request because it canceled it inside Business Central. And then the Power Automate flow will fail. We'll just say, sorry, but because Business Central then says, oh, I already got a response on this one. I was not waiting for an approval response anymore. So Power Automate will fail because Business Central reports an error, and nobody then knows what exactly happened. Another thing that could also happen is that the Power Automate flow is cancelled. So this one here is actually this one here is cancelled. So here is actually not loaded into memory anymore. It's just abandoned, aborted, and that does mean that it does not take any further steps. It does not tell or update on the approvals connected that it should be cancelled. Well, there is not even an action on the approval connector to cancel or stop or quit or reject or whatever an approval request. It can only start and wait for an approval request. So Power Automate flow has no option to tell Dataverse, hey, I'm cancelled, so the approval request should be cancelled. Meaning that Power Automate flow is not listening anymore. If the user tries to approve or reject, it goes into the Power Automate flow that is not running anymore, so nothing happens. It disappears in thin air. While at the same time, Business Central has no idea what happened with Power Automate. It's still waiting for the response. As a result, the approval request is stuck pending approval, it says, and the only way to get out of that is by canceling the approval request in Business Central as well. Otherwise, yeah, you have no other option. So let me demonstrate this behavior to you. First of all, I have at this moment no approval flows running. Opening my sandbox environment and opening the workflow overview, and here we are. The idea is that it opens workflows, but there was only one workflow. So no approval workflow here. And if we now would say in a purchase invoice, for example, request for approve, request approval, it will say, sorry, I cannot do that because I have no approval workflow configured here. So let me quickly create an approval flow based on a template from Microsoft. Business Central purchase invoice is the search, and I go with the first one here, there are different templates, they behave all a little bit different, but that is not what I want to focus on. I need to connect to Business Central. Well, I did it before, so it already knows the connections. Otherwise, you would have links here to create the connections for you. Then I need to select the environment. It's going to be my sandbox and my Cronus company, and give an email title. Please approve this document. Well, actually, it's for purchase invoice, so maybe I should just say approve this purchase invoice. Now, if I do now edit in advanced mode, it will open the flow where I can see the different steps. And it does not at that point not enable the flow, not turn it on. If I click on create, it will create a flow and turn it on, just that you know. So that it's now creating the flow and turns it on. I can tell because here it is also, well, I had a pop-up, but also here it says turn off, meaning it's currently turned on. And I can see the status here as well. So when I go back to Business Central here, then I have a purchase document approval workflow created. Now, before we go into the demonstration of cancellation, cancel and reject, etc., I just want to give you one extra tip. What happens if I create another approval flow? Let me create one from the template for Business Central purchase order. I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did before, and continue, choose the sandbox again, sandbox and Cronus, and here say, please approve this purchase order and create it. Okay, so at this point, we have two flows here for Business Central purchase order and one for purchase invoice. Now let's look into Business Central. I got another one, but they have exactly the same name. And this is a little bit confusing, of course. You have no idea which one is which one. The only thing to find out would be to go into it and then see here, but on condition that this is the invoice one and the other one is then the order one. What I suggest, so we always do, is change the, after we have created the approval flow, we change it into purchase invoice approval. So remove that Word document, replace it with what it actually is. And here I change this to purchase order approval. And I remove the workflow because I know it is a workflow. And I do that for another reason, which I will show you a little later. So now I know at least which one is which one. Good. Let's now go into purchase invoices and request an approval. I've set up approvals already here with different users, etc. Actually, I should go into this user. No, that's not the one. This, yeah, this is the user that is going to request a purchase invoice. So I'm here on a purchase invoice. It is open, and let's do a request for approval. It's now sent. So if I go back in to this one here, I would now see at least one flow is running 7 seconds ago. And then if I go to the approver, the approver should receive an approval request. Let me see. I got approvals here. And here I have a new one, which is for today. requested, and if I now say, okay, reject or approve, I mean, let's go back into Business Central. Let's do that where we have the happy flow one time. And I need to refresh, by the way, this Teams, because this is Teams on the web. Apparently, does not give me an updated list every time. The Teams app in the desktop app, that works a little bit better, of course. So I'll go back into my invoice here and refresh, and now it's released. All right, so far so good. Now let me go into what happens when I just reopen this one and send another approval request. Again, it's pending approval. And well, I can see here that it sent me an approval request, but now I'm not going to reject or approve. I'm just going to ignore this for a moment. And let's imagine the user here says, oh, this was not 100% correct. I need to change something. But he cannot make a change to this document because the approval request is already sent out. So the only thing that he can do is say cancel approval request. Now this cancel approval request is only possible for the approver. So another user cannot do this. Only possible for the user who requested the approval or for the approval administrator. So if we go to approval user setup, okay, it was there for just 1 second. Why is it moving? Okay, okay. Approval setup, there it is. Here we have the approval administrator, which is the admin user in this setup. I cannot turn on this for another user because it is only allowed to have one approval administrator. Don't ask me why, because I think it should be it could be useful to have multiple. Because what if the user goes on holiday? You also need to change the approval admin all the time. So that's not really funny, and I don't see any problem in having multiple approval administrators. So, but yeah, it is what it is out of the box at least. So at this point, the Power Automate flow here is still running. You see, it's running, it's waiting, but it was cancelled. So if the user now sends another approval request, let's do that. The flow here will have 2 of them. And they're actually waiting for the same document. So here I have, let me refresh this one. Here I have 2 approvals, 2 approval requests for the same invoice. So here I have this one, 107209, and here I have another one. Now, if I take the first one and approve, the approver may now think, okay, I'm done. I'm not sure why I have 2, yes, unless he was informed maybe by his colleague. But when we now look into the flow, we have a failed flow. And when we look into the failed flow, it's going to tell us an error message here on the approve action. And the error message says a dialog exception. Yeah, well, the response was already received. Let us copy that for a moment and copy that into Notepad. Like this. And here we see that it says a response has already been received. Well, isn't that strange? Because nobody responded. Well, that's because it was cancelled in Business Central. And the only way to find out what happens is by going into Power Automate and read the message. So this is something to keep in mind, I can only say for now, because this is just how it works, and this we learned the hard way. Of course, it would be a nice idea if Business Central would be able to call into Dataverse to at least, well, cancel the approval request. That is something that is out of the box, not possible. And honestly, I'm working on a solution for that. The first prototype looks promising. I found an API that I could use. That API was not documented, but people were using it, and apparently Microsoft is using that same API as well. But it's at the same time a little bit risky, of course, because an undocumented API might be changed in the future. But after all, Teams is using an API for it, so that same API could be used by Business Central as well. So in case of a cancellation of an Power Automate approval request, what Business Central actually should do is call with an API into Dataverse and cancel the approval request the same way as Teams does it. So Power Automate can then pick it up and nicely and gracefully cancel it in Business Central. That is what I created as a prototype, and that seems to work. So I'm gonna do some more work on it, and maybe in the second half of this year, I have a solution for it that hopefully I can even persuade Microsoft to start using it. So having said that, what I just explained to you is this, just in one slide, canceling an approval flow. When you do it in Power Automate, the flow stops running, approval request remains, not possible to restart at a failing position, only logic apps that's possible. So you can not really win in this situation. Well, that's not fully true. Let me show you what the best way is of canceling an approval flow today. Here I have still a pending approval, and the approval is here as well as a request. What is possible and what should be done by the requester is not cancel the approval request from Business Central, because Business Central is not gonna help you. Instead, what he does need is go to the same place as where the approver is seeing his approval requests in Teams, to the Approvals app, but then to the Send tab. And here at the Send tab, we see all the outgoing approval requests that user created. And here the user can cancel the request. So instead of doing it in Business Central, the user, the requester, should go into Teams and from Teams cancel the request. What now happens is it's canceled from here. The approver, we're now at the approver here, gets a message. Let me just F5 that screen. Here, the approver also sees cancelled. So when you open it, it cannot do anything anymore. And when we look into Business Central, it is open again. So this is the behavior what you would expect when you click on cancel approval request in Business Central. You should not do it. And in our solution, we have here a warning to the user, hey, you should not cancel from here. You should go into Teams and cancel it there from your Approvals app in Teams on the request, on the Send tab. That makes sense, I would say, and is a way a lot better to work with it. And that is what I have here on this screen. Canceling in Business Central does not notify Power Automate. Flow will run, continue to run, or when you cancel a Power Automate flow, doesn't help either. What you should do is cancel the open approval request in Teams. That is the only way that it works. Okay, so imagine you have a new version of your Power Automate flow. You have whatever made a change in the behavior, maybe changed the text or added some extra details. There can be many reasons to change the Power Automate flow. How can you update? When you want to upgrade an approval flow, the first step that you need to do is duplicate the flow in Power Automate. Do not just open the Power Automate flow and make your changes directly in it. I mean, usually you make the modifications in a development environment anyway. So what I usually do is I duplicate the flow in Power Automate, or I do that in the development environment, and when I import it in the production environment, I give it a version number on the name. So in the flow name, I have a version number, V1, V1.1, V2, etc. Then you have two flows. One is active and one is not active. So the old one, the V1 is active and the V2 is not active. So make it turn on and turned off. Then what you do is you turn off the V1 version, the previous active Power Automate flow. When that is done, okay, so now I get the wrong box here. Okay, when that is done, the old workflow in Business Central will not be deleted. We saw that earlier when you turn on a Power Automate flow, it creates the workflow in Business Central. And when you turn it off, it will delete it. But if there were any pending approval request, it will not delete the workflow in Business Central. You only turn it off, but there are still running flows. What then happens is the responses on the old workflow will still be processed by the disabled workflow because it has running instances of that flow, and it will still pick up the old or running, or I should say responses to that running workflow. You then turn on the new Power Automate flow, of course, all in the same minute, which means that the new request will be picked up by the new Power Automate flow, while responses to the old one will still be processed by the old approval flow. And what you then also need to do is go into Business Central and add a version number to the workflow name in Business Central. And what I mean with that is here, I do not only have purchase invoice approval, but I also always have V1.0. And when another is created, that's becoming V2.0, etc. And the one that is active has an enabled yes. And what I actually usually also do is something like this. Put a check mark, oops, in front of that name. So this is the one that is active. And then if there is a version 2 created, and version 1 is disabled, I turn that green check mark into a red cross, like this. So that one still exists, but is disabled, and then it's shown like this. So that is what I usually do when updating to a newer version. When all approval requests have been processed by the old one, Business Central workflow and also the Power Automate flow can then be deleted safely. So this is the steps that I take to update an approval flow to a newer version. I would like to end with a few tips because I see that I'm almost at the end of the presentation, or actually the time I got. Sometimes you are dealing with a error message like this. You are a delegated admin. You want to in a sandbox run an approval request to test it, and you cannot because you do not have permissions to run a scheduled task. What does that have to do with approval flows? Well, approval flows are sent out to Power Automate using a scheduled task. So that is a little bit uncomfortable because you need to be a real user in the sandbox rather than a delegated admin. And of course, for production, that makes sense because as a delegated admin, you should never run an approval request, but for sandbox and development, it can be a little bit awkward. So what you need to do to mitigate this problem is subscribe to the event on-find task scheduler allowed in code unit workflow webhook management and override the parameter is task scheduling allowed. So what I do here is if the environment is sandbox, if the user is a delegated admin or a delegated help desk, then I say task scheduling allowed is false. Well, wasn't that what the message said? Yes, but the code behind will not even try the task scheduler in that case, and it will instead send out the approval request straight from the current user session, which makes all the sense. So with this little piece of code in your app, you are able to send approval requests from sandbox environments as a delegated admin. Same goes for deleting approval workflows as a delegated admin. Sometimes you want to do that with a cleanup task, which is also done with a task scheduler, which cannot be done by a delegated admin. Can be annoying when you are in a sandbox. So what you then also need to do is subscribe to on-find task scheduler allowed, but this one is not in the code unit that we had before, but in a table workflow webhook subscription. So this is a different event only used in case of cleanup when you delete a webhook. And by the way, talking about deleting, I mention it here, cleaning up. When you copy a production environment to a sandbox environment, make sure to manually disable the approval workflows because that's not cleaned up by Microsoft's code at the moment. So we have code created for that enables all of them, and all pending approval requests are then cancelled in the sandbox as part of the cleanup task on copy sandbox. Final view slides. I only have a few left. If a flow is stuck, you can of course go into the flow in Power Automate, and you can see where it is stuck, unless you have a loop. If there's a loop in the flow, you do not know where exactly it is. It could be in iteration 1 or 2 or 3 of that flow, of that loop, and you don't know. So what you would see is this at the right top corner of that step, and it's running and running and running, and you have no idea where it is. You cannot really see the details of it. So in other words, be careful with loops, especially when that loop contains what we have, the create an approval request, because then it will stop inside the loop and wait for the user. And at the same time, I have no idea where exactly it is, and is it waiting for something or not. This, yeah, the loops are a little bit not so useful when it comes to debugging, I would say. And when you cancel the flow, you say, oh, I have no idea what it's doing, it's too long, let me cancel the flow. All status inside the loop is gone. Nothing is saved into database, into Dataverse. So yeah, when you are in this situation and you have no idea what's going on, you're just out of luck. And I do not have a solution for that. When you have an error situation, then, well, you want to handle it. What you do here in this case is add a extra branch So adding an extra branch is, I'm quickly doing that here. Let me go into this one and edit it. It's actually by this, and then say right click, add a parallel branch, and let me go into initialize a variable. Oh, come on. Why do you do that like this? So here we have two steps, but now on this one, for example, I can say this is executed after get customer, but not when it is successful, but when it is fails or is skipped. So now we have a parallel branch, and here I can do my error handling. Well, that is very useful in case of error situations, of course. So in this case, I have it defined here. If create an approval fails, I go for an error message and update the record in Business Central that there was an error with creating approval. For example, the email address was incorrect. That can happen. Sometimes you have a deadlock in, I have been running into this one, probably due to some not so, well, in order of locking in code. Doesn't happen always. We haven't seen it now for quite some time, but sometimes it does, especially when you're updating the approval response. The way to do that is retry the approval action. This is, by the way, the final slide, so I'm almost done. So what happens here is I'm doing a do until. I have a variable execute action that I define here with true, and I do it until that execute action is false. So first time it comes in, it's still true, so it runs the action approve. Now when it is successful, I set that execute action to false, so it doesn't do it another time. It just quits out of this box. But when it is failing, I say the execute action is true, and this is on the run after error. And it's going to do this again, but here I say do it up to up to 5 times. And you can also have options like wait for a couple of seconds, of course, but do this 5 times. So it's going to do a retry 5 times to run the action approve until it decides, okay, after 5 times, it's pretty sure that I'm not gonna, this is not gonna work anymore. So this is just a way to retry an operation in case it fails to a number of times. With that, I'm over time. Sorry for that. I hope you find it useful. Well, if there are any questions, but you have not interrupted me during the presentation, but maybe there are still some questions that I need to address.
There's indeed one question came in okay. 2 minutes ago. Out of curiosity, when trying to investigate a loop, did it make any difference to change the loop's concurrency settings, disabling the running in parallel?
I have tried it out, and as far as I remember, it didn't make a difference. But honestly, it's been a while ago, so it could have been changed. But I think I tried it, and it didn't make any difference.
Okay, perfectly. And then indeed, Artis has no questions, but thanks, AJ, for sharing it with us. Indeed.
Right.
Thanks a lot. And indeed, there are no questions. I think it is quite clear to it. And also learned something. I didn't know that also the workflow steps were also, or the approvals saved into Dataverse. Just one maybe question is, we know the Biz Central approvals, but now on we have also the approvals inside Power Automate. If you're looking into the future, what will you think will be the best? Using the Biz Central workflows and approvals in that case, or the Power Automate?
Good one. The point is that the approval app from Microsoft integrates with Teams, so that is very convenient to keep using that. If we would not, if we would completely bypass the Power Automate app from Microsoft, then we should have to create it ourselves, because users seem to love to work in Teams with it. And yeah, you will still need Power Automate somehow to, for example, send emails with adaptive cards and whatnot. But I can very much imagine creating your own app in Teams with the same behavior as you have in the in the Microsoft Approvals app. But then the question, of course, is where does it get its data from, especially when the approver is not a user in Business Central. Yeah, then it's probably a little bit more difficult to get that information out of Business Central right away. But yeah, so I think the approval app for Microsoft needs some love to introduce more APIs, real APIs, or a graph API. There seems to be a graph API, but somehow it's doing something completely different with a completely different set of approvals, app, whatever. I think the whole approval, the way how it currently works, needs some love, both from the Business Central team and for the team that maintains the approval app in Teams. And for Microsoft, I would recommend looking into external business events, so you can have less Power Automate flows, because now you need to have a approval flow in Power Automate for every single company in Business Central. Yeah. That will be reduced if you use external business events, and maybe just bypass that complete workflow engine in Business Central, which is quite complicated. And I think there could be a lot more, or a lot less complex. But just on, some thoughts from my side, and we are looking into other ways, but the problem is you can develop something, but nobody's gonna pay for it, of course, because it's just the same experience that you get. So they're not really getting something new. Yeah, it is better maintainable for us. At the same time, they have approvals and they get approvals. So what do you actually charge for in that case?
Yeah, indeed. That is true.
But a lot of things can be discussed there.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, AJ, for your time and spending your lessons learned on the approvals. It's what I said before. It was very clear, and I think a lot of people learned a lot. Thanks also on behalf of the Europa webinar team. And as said, the webinar is recorded, and we'll upload it maybe this evening or tomorrow, and will be shown on the YouTube channel. And if you have some comments, or just email us, or subscribe to the newsletter. So thanks for attending, and have a great day ahead for it. Thanks a lot.
Right. Okay. Thanks all. Bye.